How does a woman who spent 6 years being the perfect wife end up standing in the middle of her own living room, holding the one thing that would destroy her entire family and smiling? That's the question I asked myself the night everything fell apart. And honestly, I'm still not sure if I'm proud of what I did, or just relieved it's finally over. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I teach 3rd grade at an elementary school in Columbus, Ohio. And until 8 months ago, I thought I had a pretty good life. Not a perfect life. Nobody has that but a good one. A steady job I loved. A house with a real backyard. A husband named Daniel, who used to leave coffee on the counter for me every morning without being asked. I thought that meant something. I should have paid more attention to when he stopped doing it. Daniel and I met in college, married at 24, and spent the first few years figuring out how to be adults together. His sister Rachel was always part of the picture. She lived 45 minutes away and came over at least twice a month, sometimes more. I never minded. Rachel was fun, loud in a good way, and she always brought wine. She and Daniel were close in that way. Some siblings are where they had their own language of inside jokes and half-finished sentences. I used to find it endearing. Rachel had been going through a rough divorce for about 2 years. Her ex-husband Greg had left her for someone from his office. And she was still raw about it. So when she started coming over more often 3 times a week, sometimes staying for dinner, sometimes still there when I got home from work, I told myself I was being a good sister-in-law, supportive, passion. Daniel told me the same thing. She's having a hard time. Claire, she just needs family right now. I believed him. I believed him for a long time. The first moment I felt something was wrong wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a lipstick on a collar or a mysterious text. It was a Wednesday evening in March. I came home from a parent-teacher conference that ran 45 minutes late, walked in through the back door, and found Daniel and Rachel sitting at the kitchen table. They weren't doing anything. Just sitting there, talking. But when I opened the door, Rachel's hand moved off the table fast. The way you move when you've been caught touching something that doesn't belong to you. I told myself I imagined it. I didn't imagine it. 3 weeks later, Daniel started picking fights with me about nothing. The grocery bill. The way I loaded the dishwasher. Why I was always so tired. Every argument felt manufactured. Like he needed a reason to be angry at me so he could justify something he was already doing. I recognized it in hindsight. I didn't recognize it then. Then came my best friend Mara's birthday party. It was a Saturday night in April. About 30 people at her house. The kind of easy backyard gathering where you drink too much rosé and laugh until your face hurts. Daniel didn't want to go. We argued about it in the car. He said I always prioritized my friends over us. I said that was insane. It was one party, and she was my best friend since high school. He went silent the entire drive and spent most of the night on his phone in the corner, on the way home. He told me he thought I'd been flirting with Mara's neighbor, a man named Tom, who I had spoken to for maybe 7 minutes near the chip bowl. Daniel's voice was cold and flat when he said, "It, not jealous certain," like he'd already made up his mind and was simply informing me of his conclusion. I laughed, because I thought he was joking. He wasn't joking. "I saw the way you were looking at him," he said. "Don't insult me by pretending." I spent the rest of that night trying to convince my husband that I had not been flirting with a man I barely knew. I cried. He didn't. He went to bed, and I sat in the kitchen until 2 a.m, replaying every second of that party in my head, wondering if I had done something wrong. I hadn't. But I didn't know that yet, with full confidence. Because when someone you love tells you something about yourself with enough certainty, some part of you starts to wonder. After that, Daniel's suspicion became background noise in our marriage. He'd make small comments, ask where I was going, check in when I stayed late for school events. Once he drove past the school parking lot on a Tuesday evening, and when I got home he casually mentioned he'd been in the neighborhood. I knew what that was. I just didn't want to name it. Rachel was still coming over constantly. I started paying attention differently. I noticed that Rachel would text Daniel, and he'd check his phone within seconds, that specific alertness people have for one person's messages versus everyone else's. I noticed that when I walked into a room where they were talking, the conversation would shift, smooth and practiced, like they'd rehearsed the pivot. I noticed that Rachel had started touching his arm when she talked to him. Just briefly. Just casually. The way you touch someone you're comfortable with. the way you touch someone you're used to touching. I told myself I was becoming paranoid. Daniel's accusations had gotten into my head, and I was projecting. I was a third-grade teacher, not a detective. I was being ridiculous. But I'm also a woman who lives alone with a man. And women who live alone with men learn to notice things. Small things. True things. In May, our home security camera caught something I was never supposed to see. I want to be careful how I say this. We had a camera system installed 2 years ago after a neighbor's car was broken into just a few small cameras. Front door, back door, and one inside the garage. I checked them maybe once a month, out of habit. Usually from my phone. I'd forgotten, half the time, that they existed. On a Thursday afternoon when I was at school, Daniel had come home early. I knew this because his car was in the driveway when I pulled in at 4:15. I also knew Rachel was there because her car was parked on the street. When I walked in, they were in the kitchen, and Rachel left within 10 minutes, saying she had an appointment. Daniel kissed me on the cheek and asked what I wanted for dinner. Normal, ease, nothing to notice. But that night I couldn't sleep. And somewhere around 1 a.m, I opened the security camera app out of nothing, just restlessness. Just a bit. I scrolled back through the day's footage, not looking for anything. And then I stopped scrolling. What I saw in that footage? I will not describe in detail. I don't need to. You understand what I mean when I say that what Daniel and Rachel were doing in our living room, on our couch on a Thursday afternoon in May, was not something that siblings do. It was not something that is ambiguous or open to interpretation. It was not something I could explain away. I sat in our bedroom in the dark for a very long time. Daniel was asleep 2 feet away from me. I did not wake him up. I did not cry. I felt something go very quiet inside me, not numb exactly, but still, like the moment after a car accident when your body hasn't caught up to what just happened and you're just sitting there, hands on the wheel, completely calm, because the shock is still processing. I saved the footage to my phone, then I saved it to a cloud folder. Then I emailed it to a separate email account I created that night. I am a third-grade teacher. I am not dramatic. But I have watched enough of my students' parents go through ugly things to know that when you have the truth, you protect it. You don't wave it around. You don't send it anywhere in anger. You keep it safe, and you think carefully about what comes next. I thought carefully for 7 weeks. During those 7 weeks, Daniel's behavior shifted again. The accusations became more frequent and more specific. He asked about a male colleague of mine named Patrick, who I'd mentioned once in passing. He went through my phone one night while I was in the shower. I came out and found him sitting on the bed with it in his hand. He didn't even pretend. He just looked at me and said, "You deleted something." I hadn't deleted anything. There was nothing to delete. "Daniel," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected. "What are you doing?" "I'm trying to figure out who my wife actually is," he said. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I understood something in that moment that I hadn't let myself understand before. He wasn't suspicious of me because he'd seen something. He was suspicious of me because he needed me to be guilty. He needed it to be mutual. He needed us both to be betraying each other so that what he was doing became something other than what it was. People do that. They manufacture reasons so they can live with themselves. The night everything ended was the night of my sister-in-law's, Daniel's other sister, Julie's 40th birthday dinner. Julie had planned a big family gathering at her house. About 20 people, her kids, her husband's family, Daniel's cousin, their aunt and uncle from Michigan. It was the kind of event you cannot get out of without causing a scene. We drove there separately because I had a school event that afternoon, and told Daniel I'd meet him there. The truth is, I wanted my own car. I wanted the ability to leave on my own terms. The dinner was fine for the first hour. Julie's husband made ribs. The kids ran around the backyard. Daniel's aunt asked me 3 times when we were going to have children, which was its own particular kind of wonderful. Rachel was there, wearing a yellow dress, laughing at something Daniel's cousin said. She hugged me when I arrived. I hugged her back. I smiled the entire time. Toward the end of the evening, people had moved to the living room. Someone had connected their phone to the TV to show vacation, photos from a cruise. It was casual people half watching, half talking, the comfortable looseness of a family party winding down. Daniel chose that moment. I still don't know exactly what triggered it. Maybe the wine. Maybe he'd been building toward it all evening. Maybe he simply looked at me across the room and decided it was time to do what he'd been wanting to do for weeks. He walked over to where I was standing near the bookshelf and he said, loudly enough for the people nearby to hear, "I need you to tell me the truth. Right here, in front of the family. Are you cheating on me?" The room went quiet in that particular spreading way, like a stone dropped in water. I looked at him. His jaw was set. His eyes were steady. He wanted me humiliated. He wanted me to cry, or deny, or get angry to perform guilt or innocence in front of his entire family, so he could point at my reaction as evidence either way. Julie said, "Daniel, what? I'm serious," he said. He wasn't yelling. He was calm. That was almost worse. I want her to answer the question. Everyone was watching me. His aunt, his cousins, his mother, who was sitting near the window, Rachel, in her yellow dress, who had gone very still. I took a breath. I took out my phone. I walked to the TV, the big flat screen mounted on Julie's wall that was still showing cruise photos, and I unplugged the Bluetooth connection from his cousin's phone. I connected mine. I opened the cloud folder. I looked at Daniel one more time. "You want the truth," I said. "Okay." I pressed play. I will not describe what happened in that room in the seconds after I pressed play. I will say only that there was a sound I had never heard before, a kind of collective intake of breath that seemed to come from multiple people at once. I will say that Rachel stood up. I will say that Daniel's face changed in a way that I had not seen in 6 years of knowing him. I will say that his mother said something very quietly that I could not hear. And I will say that I had already picked up my purse from the chair beside the bookshelf. I walked to the front door. Julie followed me into the hallway. "Claire." Her voice was barely above a whisper. She looked like she'd been struck. "Claire, I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. And I meant it. Julie had nothing to do with any of this. She grabbed my hand. "Where are you going?" "To Mara's," I said. "She's expecting me." I had called Mara that afternoon and told her everything. She had a key waiting for me and a bottle of wine open by the time I got there. I did not look back at the house when I walked to my car. I did not check my phone for 4 hours. When I finally did, there were 14 missed calls from Daniel and a text from Rachel that I deleted without reading. There was also a voicemail from Daniel's aunt, the one who'd been asking about babies that I also did not listen to until 2 days later. When I finally did, she said only, "You did the right thing." "Sweetheart, I'm sorry. It came to this." Daniel called again the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. He said he was sorry. He said he needed to explain. He said it wasn't what it looked like. Which is a sentence that should be retired from the English language entirely, because it is never true. He called 3 more times that day. On the 4th call, I picked up. "I want you to know," I said, "that I loved you, past Tinsu. And I want you to know that I wasn't flirting with Tom at Mara's birthday party, and I didn't delete anything from my phone. And Patrick is 62 years old, and has grandchildren, and I've spoken to him maybe twice in 2 years. I want you to know that you spent months making me feel like I was losing my mind, to protect yourself from what you were doing. And I want you to know that I'm done." He started to say something. I hung up. I filed for divorce 11 days later. The house was technically in both our names, but my lawyer was thorough, and I was patient. I moved into an apartment in September, close to the school. 3rd floor, a little balcony where I put a container garden and grew cherry tomatoes that fall. Mara helped me paint the living room a shade of green that she called expensive sage, and I called the color of starting over. We were both right. I still teach 3rd grade. I still love it. My kids this year are particularly wonderful. One little girl named Olivia, who is reading at a 5th grade level and corrects my spelling on the whiteboard with tremendous satisfaction, and a boy named Marcus, who draws the most detailed rocket ships I've ever seen and wants to work at NASA. They make everything make sense on the days when nothing else does. I heard through a mutual friend that Daniel and Rachel are no longer speaking. I don't know if that means their relationship ended or simply collapsed under the weight of what it was. I don't spend much time thinking about it. Some people have asked me if I regret how I did it. if I should have handled it privately. If I should have confronted Daniel alone, or hired a lawyer first, or just quietly filed for divorce without the scene at Julie's house. Maybe. Those are fair questions. But here is what I know. Daniel stood in the middle of his sister's living room and demanded that I perform my innocence in front of his entire family. As though I were on trial for something I hadn't done. He made that choice. He chose the audience. He chose the stage. I just chose what got shown on it. I am 31 years old. I teach children to read and to be kind and to tell the truth even when it's hard. I try to do those things myself. I am not a person who wanted drama or revenge or a story to tell. I just wanted a good life with someone who was honest. I still want that. I'm just looking somewhere else now. And if you're sitting somewhere tonight feeling like the walls of your own life are moving inward, like someone who claims to love you is quietly, carefully making you feel like you're the problem, I want you to hear this. You are probably not the problem. Trust that quiet thing in your chest that already knows. The truth doesn't need you to chase it. It has a way of coming to the surface on its own. Sometimes you just have to be ready to press play. Do subscribe.